The act of dehumanizing has been defined as a means of restricting the rights, qualities and human aspects of a specific group or person. But how is this possible? What is the mechanism to facilitate humans treating their fellow man in this way? In his book, Ordinary Men, Christopher Browning argues that by nature, people are partly slaves to their environment. Inherently observing the culture and social norms to which they are accustomed results in actions that people otherwise wouldn't have undertaken on their own. By not accepting that the Germans involved in executing the Holocaust were ordinary people, then we too are guilty of assigning a specific trait to them. Instead, we should consider the idea of a shared human quality that can be evoked given the right circumstances. More recent examples of massacres and oppression, where human beings turn on each other, in places like Bosnia and Rwanda, were not incidents that sprung up overnight, but rather a result of years and years of dehumanizing and belittling treatment, as well as policies designed by one side to discriminate, oppress, and minimize the human rights and value of the other. This made it less daunting when it came to removing members of this group either from their homes or from existence. The United States used a similar approach to justify slavery. If all men are created equally, then for slavery to work, some people must be less than men, and therefore not deserving of, or entitled to the same rights as everyone else. And even without a constitution, man turning on his fellow man has been ever present throughout history. In Brazil, the number of slaves that were imported exceeded that of the United States. While Brazil was not a democratic country, the United States was a parliamentary democracy, yet slavery and dehumanizing occurred in both countries regardless of political and social stance. According to ADL, whose mission statement reads, "To stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all," Nazi ideology would manifest via type of occupation, citizenship, and violence. Jews were precluded from certain government and civic roles, Jewish citizens were not afforded the same rights as German citizens, and there was an increase in violence towards the Jewish community both physically and via the confiscation of their property. Similarly, in Rwanda, by restricting the amount of education and high-level jobs available to the Tutsi, the Hutu were gradually consolidating their dominance via these discriminatory policies. The ideology that developed as a result ascribed the Tutsi as inferior foreigners rather than natives. Regarding civilians as inferior and disposable was also evident in Bosnia at the hands of Serbia. Acquiring territory and property forcibly was regarded as constant examples of human rights violations, creating a refugee crisis as a direct result of civilian eviction and expulsion. Combined with detention centers and Serbian concentration camps, the United Nations described the policies undertaken by Slobodan Milosevic as genocide via ethnic cleansing. The mass murder that took place was the consequence of many years of degrading and belittling treatment inflicted by the Serbian forces. Croats and Bosnian Muslims were repeatedly subjected to workplace discrimination and expelled from public office. And a prerequisite of enlisting in the Serbian army was not only swearing an oath of allegiance to the nationalists in Serbia, but renouncing any other nationality. One of the most famous examples of political discrimination was in apartheid South Africa, which espoused the vicious ideology that people of different racial origins could not live together in equality and harmony. Group identity and tribalism appear to have their origins in language. In Nazi Germany, the Jews were repeatedly referred to as rats, vermin, parasites, and an infectious disease that needed to be removed. Such dehumanizing characterization made the Holocaust seem more like the chore of tidying up and cleansing, rather than mass murder. The ultimate realization of this belief was present in the death camps, where Zyklon B was deployed in the gas chambers, the same pesticide the Nazis used in the factories and warehouses to exterminate the rodents and vermin. Similarly, the term the Hutus chose to describe the Tutsi was cockroaches. In Rwanda, as in Germany, the language and ideology meant the so-called exalted ends justified any means necessary. And if it's merely insects and vermin in your way, then they should be removed. The irony is that the actions Israel has undertaken since its violent and illegal inception are virtual mirror images of those deployed by their previous oppressors. The very people subjected to the Holocaust are carrying out policies that demean, discriminate, forcibly evict, and murder those from an ethnicity and race that differs from their own. When laid out as plainly as this, the similarities are striking. In Nazi Germany, Rwanda, Bosnia and apartheid South Africa, the oppressors did not grant the same rights to those they regarded as inferior. Here are 10 examples of discrimination in Israel. Number 1. The 1950 Law of Return grants anyone who is Jewish, as well as their children, grandchildren, and spouses, the right to move to Israel and automatically gain citizenship. Non-Jews do not have these rights. Palestinians and their descendants have no legal right to return to the lands their families held before being displaced in 1948 or 1967. Non-Jewish foreigners may naturalize after living there for at least 3 years while holding permanent residency, demonstrating proficiency in the Hebrew language, and renouncing their previous nationalities, while Jewish immigrants are not subject to this requirement. Number 2. Another major difference is that unlike the vast majority of Jewish Israelis, Arab citizens do not have to serve in the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF. Through the IDF, Israelis receive many financial benefits, such as education assistance and discounted permits for building homes and owning land. Number 3. Permanent residency grants Palestinians in East Jerusalem many of the same rights as Israeli citizenship, including the ability to live, work, and travel freely within Israel, as well as access to health insurance and social services. However, they do not get Israeli passports and cannot vote in national elections. Number 4. At checkpoints going into the West Bank, there's one channel for the Israelis or Europeans, and a separate channel for the Arabs. There's no chance for communication and building normal family relationships within the West Bank, as Israelis who marry people from the West Bank are not permitted to live with them in Israel. So Israel is essentially controlling who people can love, and who they are connected to. Number 5. A government audit in July 2022 found Arabs had less access to municipal services than Israeli Jews. Services including sanitation, water, streets, the public library, schools, food inspection, fire department, police, ambulance, and transportation. Number 6. The 1950 absentee property law also discriminates between Israeli and Arab residents. Any property within post-war Israel which was owned by an Arab who had left the country between November 29, 1947 and May 19, 1948, or by a Palestinian who had merely been abroad or in an area of Palestine held by hostile forces up to September 1, 1948, lost all rights to that property. Israel then passed in 1970 the Law and Administration Arrangements Law, allowing for Jews who had lost property in East Jerusalem and the West Bank during the 1948 war to reclaim it. Israeli legislation, therefore, allows Jews to recover their land, but not Arabs. The old houses in the central streets of Haifa have been turned into cafes owned by Israeli Europeans who claim to be left-wing and love Arabs. Yet they reside in houses Palestinians still have the keys for. Number 7. Comparisons to South African laws and practices by the apartheid regime show strong correlations with Israeli practices. These include discriminatory privileges based on ascribed ethnicity, legally, as Jewish or non-Jewish, draconian enforced ethnic segregation in all parts of life, including confining groups to ethnic reserves and ghettos, comprehensive restrictions on individual freedoms, such as movement and expression. There's also a dual legal system based on ethno-national identity. Treatment is dependent on whether you're Jewish or Palestinian. There is denationalization, essentially denial of citizenship, and a special system of laws designed selectively to punish any Palestinian resistance to the system. Number 8. The ideology of oppressors of the past has echoes in Zionism, a nationalist, political ideology that called for the creation of a Jewish state, and now supports the continued existence of Israel as such a state. But the explicitly Jewish character of the Israeli state means that Jews have privileges that others do not. Number 9. Israeli political, military and religious leaders have at different times described Palestinians as a cancer, vermin, and called for them to be annihilated. They are frequently portrayed as backward and a burden on the country. Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, ordered a complete siege of the Gaza Strip with, quote, "No electricity, no food, no fuel, everything is closed, we are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly," close quote. Number 10. An Amnesty International report in 2022 states that taken together, Israeli practices, including land expropriation, unlawful killings, forced displacement, restrictions on movement, and denial of citizenship rights, amount to the crime of apartheid. But why would a religious group or nation who were persecuted be so inhumane to another group? A number of psychologists, including Paulo Freire, propose that being subjected to dehumanizing practices can bring people full circle as they try to comprehend the oppressor. If being oppressed is part of being human, then to transition into fully human, the oppressed must become the oppressor.